Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth edition of Millennial Think Tank. We have quite a few brilliant panelists, and so I'm going to get through this really quickly. I want to have everybody introduce themselves and tell us who they are and what they do to start out. So Daniel Hebert, can you start, please?
Yep, so I'm Daniel Hubert, I'm 23. I'm a co-founder at steamfeed.com, and I also have a job at Newsrooms as a growth manager.
Okay, Daniel Newman.
My name is Daniel Newman. I am 33, an extremely old millennial. I am founder of a company called BroadSuite. I am the Millennial CEO, millennialceo.com. I've authored 2 books, and I contribute on Forbes, Huffington Post, and Entrepreneur regularly.
Great. Ezzy?
Hi, I'm Ezzy Redwood. I am leader of 2030 CEO, restaurateur, and I guess principal in U-Hoops, which connects athletes with overseas opportunities.
Okay. Hetty, go ahead.
Me? Oh, Hessie Jones, and I work with Amy at our company. I'm here to observe.
Okay, and participate a little. Joe?
My name is Joe Cardillo. I'm 30, and I am the deputy director for the New Mexico Compass, which is a journalism startup. I also do content growth and analytics for startups, and have a background in marketing and product and content marketing, that type of thing.
It's interesting because we have Daniel Newman on the end. That's 33 is about the end of the millennials, and then we have Kayvon, who's the last of the millennials. So Kayvon, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Kayvon Asamani. I'm 18, and I guess my entrepreneurial activity is Kayvon Music.
And he is also going to start attending the Wharton School of Business this fall, right?
Impressive.
Yes. Miranda?
Yep, that's right.
Go ahead, Miranda.
I'm Miranda Petty, and I'm co-founder of Bright Shadows, which is a medical scribe company. So we're a staffing agency for people that do medical transcription work. I'm also in the Army.
And oh, wow. And what end of the spectrum do you don't have to tell me your exact age if you don't want to. Young millennial, middle millennial, older millennial?
I'm right in the middle. I'm 25.
Okay. Tiffany?
I'm Tiffany Daniels. I'm 30. I'm on the upper end of the millennials, and I am responsible for communications and community relations for a workforce development board in Austin, Texas.
And I really wanted Tiffany in this because Tiffany's had a lot of exposure to millennial employees, Gen X and Boomer C-suites, trying to deal with millennials, and I thought she'd have an interesting perspective. So real quick, I'm going to frame the discussion a little bit with some information. Millennials are, I don't know who's calling me. Millennials are quickly becoming the most educated generation in history. Gen X has you beat now, but by the time you guys get out of school and your generation goes through school, you will have more bachelor degrees than any generation in the history of the U.S. Many to most of you, and this comes from a Pew Research study, desire to be entrepreneurs and work for yourselves. Of course, your generation has witnessed the greatest challenging economic time since the Great Depression. A lot of instability in the workplace, a lot of corporate scandals. More than 27% of millennials are currently self-employed, which is pretty mind-blowing when some of you are still not out of college yet. The obstacles that Pew turned up when they did the research was the ability to get loans and also a lack of resources, mentorship, and education on how to actually run a small business or build a business. So that's where we start. And I want to define what an entrepreneur is because I found a lot of confusion when I was networking and trying to locate you guys. A lot of you this is your first time in the think tank. So who wants to take a shot at how they would define an entrepreneur? And if you don't talk, I'll call on people. So jump in.
Well, the short form version, which I think is fairly well accepted, people can correct me if I'm wrong, is somebody who takes a lot of risk financially, particularly. I think that's sort of the shortest version.
So do you think small business owners are necessarily entrepreneurs?
No, I don't think it's an automatic thing at all. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with the level of risk that you find acceptable because one of the things that, like, for example, if you look at startups, one of the things that sort of defines a startup is growth, right? Like high traction, fast growth. Paul Graham, who runs the Y Combinator, fairly famous accelerator, is sort of famous for writing a post about that and talking about how if you're a business and you're not in the business of high volume growth really quickly, you're not a startup. I think that has a kind of a connection to what entrepreneurship is about.
Well, Daniel Newman, give me your feedback on that. What do you think an entrepreneur is?
This is high tech. This mute thing. You know, I think that Joe hits an interesting point about risk and the amount someone invests. But you know, I always looked at entrepreneurship, especially in the modern economy, as sort of the way you treat your business. And you know, I was CEO and I ran other people's companies. While I always had business ventures going on, whether they were in real estate or in consulting, and I always looked at people and entrepreneurs as kind of the way you operate your business. Now, I'm not saying there's not a technical definition like Joe said, but what I'm saying is that people who are willing to assess risk and mentally, physically, emotionally, and of course financially invest themselves in the business are people I look at as entrepreneurs. Now, some people own a business, okay, and I'm going a little long, but some people will end up owning a business. But I really look at entrepreneurs as people that are willing, like Joe said, to take risks, but not just financially, but really the way they'll pour their heart and soul into something, much like some of the people who develop startups, really with no money ever put in.
So what if you're a small business owner that pours your heart and soul into a business that you bought? Are you an entrepreneur?
You bought a business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's a pretty good definition of a financial risk. And I would also say that if you're buying it, operating it, owning it, writing the checks, you're by all intents and purposes an entrepreneur in my book. Okay.
All right. So Daniel Iber, I want to talk to you for a second. So what prompted you to start your business?
I was looking for a job essentially as soon as I started university, and the job market wasn't great. And I really didn't want my resume to stay stale for too long, so I started up Steamfeed with DJ in the summer of 2012. It was a necessity. It was something that made my resume look really, really good. And a couple months after I started it, I was able to land a job because of recent experiences of starting up that website, essentially.
And you don't have to answer this if your employer is watching, but is the goal to be employed at Steamfeed eventually?
Eventually, like maybe like in a long time from now. It's still quite a ways away. But right now, I treat it as like a learning experience and a supplement to my job, where I get twice the amount of experience in half the time, where it just helps me out with my own career. So.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Hetch.
I just wanted to ask a really quick question, Daniel, because the initial impetus to start Steam wasn't necessarily revenue, was it?
No, it was more of a project, and I knew if I wanted a job, I had to have a resume that showed more than my university degree, because where I was, everybody was expecting 3 to 5 years experience, and I had just graduated, and I didn't have the experience, so I needed to create that experience really, really quickly in order to show tangible results to CEOs in order for them to hire me.
So Miranda, tell us why you started yours.
Mine was mainly inspiration, honestly. I think that the Army helped give me the tools I needed to steer me towards entrepreneurship, not just from the experience, but also just, the mindset of if there's a problem, fix it. So having a lot of people in my family being in the medical field, and then also in my experience in healthcare, I noticed that doctors have a problem with, inputting information into their electronic records for their patients. And so by incorporating scribes, that kind of helps them to free them so that they can practice medicine, and somebody else takes care of all the clerical work. So it was mostly, inspiration.
Okay. So Kayvon, so you're just starting school, right? So,
Yep.
so what is your vision for where you're going to end up? Is the goal to be an entrepreneur? And Kayvon, you guys, I know Kayvon because he went to Milton Hershey, so I've known him since he was a freshman, I think, in high school. But I wanted him to come because he's very interested in this topic, and I'm assuming it's one reason you're going to Penn, right?
Yeah.
So I want
Okay.
to hear about where you think you'll go with
Okay.
it.
All right. This is a good question because yeah, I was hoping to share. This is like I'll give you a compound answer because they kind of go hand in hand to the first question you asked. Like what I think about entrepreneur is somebody who's an innovator who has an idea and they want to make some type of influence in this world. So some people have, you know, influence that they just want to help their own pockets. Some people have influence that because they want to help like people. Like what people's motivations are is up to them. But I think entrepreneurs are people who are innovative and want to take that initiative to make that difference, whatever it may be. So for me, like, can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So for me, like when I've always been interested in music, and I'm creative in that sense. Like when I was in elementary school, I would write songs, but it was just for fun. And then when I was a freshman, I would make music, but a little bit more seriously. Like I was producing the beats and I was writing to it, and I was like just performing at school talent shows and stuff like that. But then over time, like I was able to gain a good following in the community around here, where I went to high school, and like I noticed that it was something that people liked. People could download it. It led to, you know, I had a show in Lancaster, and it was like people buying tickets and stuff like that. And I knew that it could grow to something where people like could buy merchandise online, or buy instead of downloading my music for free, which is how it's offered right now. People could buy that stuff eventually. But I also understand that music, although it's my strongest product, it's not my product with the most promise. And the reason I say that is because if I could just make hip hop music and make a good living off of it, I wouldn't have a finance internship right now with Hershey. I'd be working on my music full time. But you got to think bigger than that, and that's one of the reasons. And you mentioned like why I wanted to go to Wharton. This is one of the reasons why. Like when I was in 8th grade, I knew that I wanted to go to a great school. I had to make a decision. I knew I was interested in music, but did I want to start paving the way towards something like Juilliard, which is like a great music institution, or did I want to start paving the way towards something like Wharton, which is a great business institution? And I just believed at the time, and I still believe that Wharton and a business school, just period, is going to help me achieve those musical dreams because it's going to help me take that roundabout route by being able to understand the business part of things, so that when I have the talent that I need, I can execute in any way I want. I can control my own channel. I know that like there are a lot of great musicians out there, just creative people, period, but they don't have any like business mindset, so they can't, you know, become profitable off of it or create the influence that they may have wanted without, you know, help from some other businessman. I want to be that businessman that can help myself and help other people.
Wow. What's your internship? You're at Hershey Company?
Hershey Entertainment and Resorts.
What's your internship in finance?
It's accounting and finance. Accounting and finance.
Are you working at Herco, like in the main office?
Yeah, so I'm working at the press building, the corporate offices, but I moved around to some of the other office spaces and other properties too. And the reason I'm doing that is because at Wharton, and you asked my vision, and I totally didn't even answer your question. At Wharton, everybody gets a BS in economics, but they also get concentrations in something or another. So I'm going to get concentrations in accounting and finance because I know that in order to run businesses, although it's not necessary, it's very important to have a great understanding and foundation in the numbers, like the accounting and the finance. And so I'm getting concentrations in those areas so that when I start my own business, I know what I'm doing in terms of making it run and continuing to be profitable, so that I can, like I said, understand that part of it, so that when the product is where it needs to be, I can just bring it right into the system and what I'm doing. So at Penn, I have like the Penn Innovation Center, which is for innovation and entrepreneurs. So like the clubs that I'm going to get involved in are going to involve learning from other kids who are at Penn, who are like a lot of the people that are in this session right now who are entrepreneurs. Like those kids who are my age have already started businesses, have already made money off of businesses, and I want to go into that environment and learn from those kids. And I want to learn from professionals and businessmen and people in the network that
All right, so
other.
Tiffany, I have to go to you, Tiffany, after that because last week we talked about the cost of education. We had a little debate as to whether an education is worth it, and Tiffany's advice at the end was get internships, get lots of them as early as you can. I don't know that we were expecting someone to get one before they even started college, right? But give me your feedback because in 3 weeks we are actually going to tackle internships and training and success after graduation. But just give me a little feedback on what you thought of that.
Honestly, I think that's great, and I commend you, Kayvon. So I'm going to go personal, but I'm a singer, and I've sung for probably 15 years, but amateur because I never took the time or the effort to really put a focus on what that meant other than just performing. So listening to you makes me feel really bad about what I've done for the last 15 years, but I'm very excited to hear that because that's exactly what I've suggested for some of the other people that I've played with that are younger than I am or in more flexible kind of situations. I think that's great, and I love that you are still pursuing your passion but have something a little more practical, because I don't think that a lot of people consider musicians entrepreneurs. It's kind of it's musicians and artists and creative types or some other thing, but that's your product ultimately, or at least one of that you could produce. And if you are able to not only excel in making your product, but in also making it available, and for people to find ways to pay for it in different ways or sponsor it, I think that's where a lot of musicians, at least those that I work with on a regular basis, lack. They just want to perform and don't understand all the other steps that are necessary to create something that they can sustain their life on. A lot of the folks that I've worked with and played with go and get normal jobs for a while and then go back into music and go back and forth instead of working to find some way to make music their normal job.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to shift the question now to how technology has impacted your ability to be successful. And Ezzy, I haven't asked you enough, so I'd love to hear. How has technology helped you? Has it made it easier to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that technology in general has changed the landscape for I guess the term millennials. It's weird for me to think of myself in the category like that. I keep thinking of the millennial falcon and stuff, which I don't know, maybe on the older side, whatever. But I think one of the main things in my mind that technology has done is allowed for people to act much swifter on the ideas that they have. And so if they have an idea, the lead time or runway before that idea happens, it can be measured in months instead of measured in years, or you don't have to get like all these experiences. It's almost a new frontier. And so I think the biggest thing that technology has contributed, which is part of the reason why the percentage of millennials is so high, for entrepreneurship, is because it almost opened up a new frontier. And I think that a lot of people have already forgotten that before the internet became really popular and really took off within the last decade and a half or so, the entrepreneurs were the restaurateurs, were the real estate agents, were the authors, were those types of people, and all of those things required a long lead time before you could really be successful. You had to develop networks, you had to develop an expertise, you had to apprentice, things like that. Whereas now with technology, you just have to have someone on your team who's a good programmer and someone with expertise, and you can kind of corral everything together and create a business.
Daniel, Daniel Newman or Daniel Iber, I mean, do you think that it's escalated the amount of entrepreneurs there are? I mean, Daniel Iber, your business is technology, isn't it?
Yeah, we run a 100% virtual company, so actually none of the founders have actually met. Okay, that's not true. DJ and Jerry's met once face-to-face, but I have never met DJ or Jerry face-to-face yet. It's all 100% virtually run.
In 4 years?
In 2 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, it was 4 years. Okay.
Um, but it's interesting because we're able to run this company and create networks and create this content without ever having to operate in a physical location, which a few years ago would have never happened. So without technology, you can't necessarily do that. Yeah, you can do a phone call, but stuff like video conferencing like this, it helps you understand better, especially when you start doodling on the same screen and you start sharing documents and writing in the same documents on Google. It just speeds up the process and allows you to do a lot more efficiently too than if we didn't have this technology to work with.
Daniel Newman, do you want to weigh in at all on technology and entrepreneurship?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything I do, I run a virtual company, you know, with employees, subcontractors, clients. I have clients in 3 continents and a dozen, you know, probably a dozen countries, and it's all enabled by technology. You know, I have a friend who at some point I got to introduce you to because he's a millennial, and he ran a tremendous web development company. He's helped Microsoft, and he kind of wrote the book on virtual company. And I think that's the biggest thing is what it is doing is it's enabling a person with a laptop to really become an entrepreneur that's doing something. It isn't a side hustle. You can run a substantial 7, 8, 9-figure business without ever taking office space, which is amazing. And that trend is being proven by bigger companies that are continuing to reduce their physical footprint.
And you have clients that are corporate, you know, bigger clients, right? You're not, because does it ever impact? See, with what we do, Hesse and I met Hesse last year. We've been doing this for over 2 years. I just met my business partners last month in Toronto. You know, I felt like I've known them. I have lots of friends like that, you know, friends online that I talk to regularly that I haven't actually touched in real life. But in our world, because we're doing social media business intelligence, we've never had a client. I have never had a client question why they don't, you know, why we're not sitting down with them. I mean, has it ever been an issue? Because I think some of your clients are more traditional than ours. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I mean, I'm in the B2B tech space primarily. You know, I do work with large global companies, and then I work with a lot of mid-size, middle-size, and even a few small businesses. But honestly, I can't even remember ever being asked to see office space. But, you know, I was telling you about my friend, his web development company did the website for time.com. And he didn't have never had an office space, never had a single, had 57 employees or something, and never once bought into office space. So, you know, I'm just saying, like, I think the trend is your physical presence matters a lot less than the product. And in the digital space, you know, like I said, 1, 3, 5 people with powerful laptop can get a lot done.
I want to add a question to this, and I don't know if one of you guys can answer it, because what's happening now is that you start a business, and Daniel Lieber, you actually alluded to the fact that, like, you've never met DJ or Jerry, and yet there's always a trust factor when you go into business with people. And it's like I was saying, Amy was talking about the fact that we hadn't met online until a year after we started the business, but
we had met in real life.
In real life, sorry. So there's always a gut check with trying to figure out, like, who you want to be in business with, right? And half the time it's a handshake or in real life meeting that will instigate whether or not you want to do business with someone. These days, if technology is the game, then obviously there's trust across this ether that, I don't know, that you have to establish, or that's already established, or makes it easier to build that trust. I don't know.
I think for me, it's become so commonplace. When Sam Fiorello and I were friends for years before we met in real life in San Francisco for lunch, and he wouldn't believe me that we hadn't met in real life. Because when you're video conferencing and you get to know someone's mannerisms and the way they talk, I don't know, it's more real than a phone call to me.
But you could also Google them, right? And you could figure out whether or not they had a questionable background or whatever. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that you don't need to be physically present to actually trust somebody.
So an interesting stat was that the video, this type of communication, actually increases retention over traditional teleconference calls by like 8 times. You know, I've lived my life around collaboration, so it is extremely interesting, and I think that's why this works now is because video and Skype, and whether it's free or freemium or premium, has actually allowed the retention and the quality of a meeting to become as good as real life and much, much more effective than audio or email type conversations, which a lot of big corporations do. Even though they have physical people, they're still not in the same place.
And you know why I prefer it in a way? Because the meetings are shorter and more effective. I mean, in the old days, in my corporate job, we would have these day-long meetings. We'd all fly out to Chicago or wherever we were, and there's something of you wouldn't stay on a hangout for 8 hours, I hope. Although we do have one partner who I love, Bob. I know you're watching. But you wouldn't. So I think there's a lot less time wasted. Okay, so let's shift to heroes. So Daniel Newman, I'm really dying to ask you this. Like, who are your entrepreneur heroes? Do you have any besides yourself?
Oh! Can you feel the love? Why did I agree to do this? I know. Other than Sean McGinnis, who I said I was going to get into this call.
Oh, for God's sake, you had to say him?
The most entrepreneurial guy that's never actually run a business. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist. If you look at who I'm quoting and who I reference to, I love disruption. If you read my columns and stuff, you'll see I talk about disruption all the time. I mean, some of them are the mainstays, and I hate to say it, but Bezos, for instance, such a disruptor. I mean, everybody knows what he's doing at Amazon, but I was having a conversation with the other night on my way home from California with my parents who joined us out there, and I said, Jeff Bezos never set out or didn't intentionally set out to disrupt the entire way we do retail. He was a bookstore online, right? That's all it started as. And you look at what it's become. Now he's looking at completely new things, like how do we disrupt the way, the things we want to buy are delivered. I mean, in his world, we would never have to leave our house. Whether that's right or wrong, that's truly entrepreneurial, it's disruptive, and it's just huge, huge risk that he takes.
But he also is better than anyone else at using data, because I love Amazon. I've been a Prime member since '98, and I love going there because they only suggest things I want. I never feel the Facebook intrusion, right? Because Amazon does it better than anybody. Yeah.
Oh, right. Absolutely. But, so, I mean, he's a traditionalist. There's a lot of people in smaller cap businesses, that I've been really, really fond of. My friend Brad Hunstable, who founded Ustream, super entrepreneur. It's funny because he was a military West Point guy, and I did a whole video series with him. And he says you would expected him to have gone into corporate, but instead he ended up doing a San Francisco startup. He's a Dallas straight and narrow Army officer, West Point graduate, and he ended up starting a tech hub like Ustream. I don't know if you guys probably are all familiar with it, which is one of the most disruptive video platforms in the world. So, from small to big, I like anybody in tech that's disrupting, and as I think Joe Cardillo said earlier, who is willing to not only take a risk, but people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is and actually make things happen that way.
Very cool. All right, Daniel Bear, I'm going to jump over to you because this question is my favorite one. Is who are your entrepreneurial heroes? Don't say Hesse Jones.
Hesse Jones. That's another $10, right?
just do 1 minute about me, and I'm good.
He paid him. He admitted it the other day.
I'm a fan of the traditional ones, like Steve Jobs. He's picking pieces and putting them together like he did was pretty great for when he did it. Even Disney, thinking about Disney and what he built and how he built it, that's pretty amazing considering everybody thought he was a little bit crazy, which really most entrepreneurs are a little bit crazy. So, in my mind anyway. Then like modern day ones, I like Joel and Leo from Buffer App. I just like the way they run their company, how transparent they are, how hardworking they are. Robert Caruso from Bundle Post, I just think he's a really, really hardworking guy. Runs a really small company, but he sticks to his gun, and he's hardworking and just is running a very, very successful social media technology company right now without and keeping it really lean and it's running it really well. And he's humble too, likes to help people. So yeah, these would be some of the CEO, not the CEOs, the entrepreneurs that I look up.
I would say Robert. I think Daniel Newman said how hardworking you have to be if you're an entrepreneur. I mean, Robert Caruso is just that's it. I mean, I don't know anybody that works as hard as him. Maybe Hesse, but he works. All right, Ezzy, who are your entrepreneurial heroes?
You said Hesse, not Ezzy.
Ezzy. I said Ezzy.
That's good.
Yeah, so for me, it's Michael Houlihan, definitely. A little bit more of the old school, but they essentially created the new sector with Barefoot Wine. So they kind of took wine from something that's at the time was kind of bourgeois, and you definitely had to feel like you were in the know in order to enjoy it and buy it. And they really kind of revolutionized the image of the entire industry, as well as creating a new model for developing liquid beverage transportation-based businesses. So in their throughout their process of not having a wine distillery themselves, not having wine gardens, they essentially franchised just the brand itself, and then outsourced all of that other stuff, which creates the inconsistencies, which then makes one year better than another year, and creates a lot of the problems. And so for me, that was in my mind a case of really turning the existing model for the industry on its head. So that's my vote.
Hey, Amy, can I just jump in with something I think this would be great for this group to discuss? Because I actually I rarely attribute success and hard work in the same sentence, and I think that was probably a misnomer to give me any credit for saying that. I do think hard work, can get people places, but I actually think one of the really well-known attributes of successful millennials is they actually know how to work smarter and not harder.
All right, so you know what you said? You didn't say you did what you said is put your heart and soul into your business, which is different than number of hours.
Right, and I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you'll hear a lot, and I think the hard work as a slogan becomes it's glorified, and it doesn't translate. Totally. I know people that work 12 hours a day and can't get squat done. I know people, and I'm not saying Tim Ferriss and his 4-hour work week is extremely realistic, but you know what? If you can find the right team, build the right people around you, have the right ideas, you can have a lot of revenue and social good and things being accomplished without time. It's really about, it's really about the ideas and how you execute them, and time is not always the right thing.
Totally dig it. The smartest man I ever worked for ran the company that I came of age in, and he worked about 4 hours a day, and he was so damn smart that he came in, he had his fingertips on everything he needed to have on it, and he knew what was, he knew the pulse of the company. Now, but I also consider the work you do when you're sitting in your car, Daniel, thinking, I think entrepreneurs think a lot all the time, so that's work to me, even if you're sitting by the pool. But totally get it. All right, Joe.
Can I chime into that?
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Crap. What's your name? Daniel? Is that his name? Daniel
Newman. Yeah. Nice ring there.
Oh yeah.
His graduation ring from university, you guys. Yeah. Good.
Okay. But anyhow, I agree with everything Daniel said. Like that he's saying throughout this whole conference. He's a star of the night. But what I wanted to throw in there too was that I also believe that working smart is the better thing to working harder, because you can, like you said, use some of the extra time that some people put in a 12-hour workday. If you were to work smart 4 hours and put some other time in your social life, then you're having a more balanced day. But I also think it's important that those smart people who can work smart, also, if those people who are able to work the smartest are also the hardest workers, then they can do so much more than what they may have realized that they could do before. Like Amy, you just mentioned you worked for somebody who worked 4 hours a day, but he was smarter than anybody you ever knew. Well, if he worked 12 hours a day, I bet he could have got even a lot more done. And the reason I say that is because I wasn't the smartest kid in my high school class, and I'm definitely not. I'm not even close to even the top 50% of the kids who are at Wharton. Like I'm not that smart compared to those kids, but I'm able to. I enjoy learning from other people, and I enjoy working hard. Like in high school, I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night because I was studying, 40 hours of class as
You were
most high school.
you were
Also, staying
valedictorian at
like 30
school.
hours a week, studying 30 hours a week, doing my extracurricular activities in student government. I was the student body president. I was on the varsity football team. I was on the varsity. I did everything, and I wasn't the best at any of those things, but I always worked my hardest, and it ended up helping me to become, I was the valedictorian of my class, but I am not, and I ended up going to, the best business school in America, but that's not because I'm the smartest kid in my class, and that's why I never brag about any of those two things, but I feel like, I got to work with some of those smart kids and learn from them, and I also outworked everybody, and that's the reason why I was able to achieve success. And I know I haven't had as much life experience as anybody else in this Google Hangout, but I do believe that those skills that helped me, achieve so much in high school, I feel like I'm going to carry a lot of those skills through in the future. Because, I mean, if I have a good idea and if I know how to work smart and efficiently, then I'm going to put that efficient time into working even more hours, too, so that I can achieve everything I want to
No,
achieve.
I totally get it, and I want you to come back when we do the internship one, because I almost had that same conversation with the woman with Hessie about the woman who was my valedictorian. I graduated 20-some years, 30 years before Kayvon from Milton Hershey School. All right, real quick.
Hey, one thing, Amy, and I'm sorry I'm hijacking you.
No, it's quick.
Maybe a quick insult you want to throw at me, and then I'll give you an answer.
No.
All right.
I always insult people.
All I was saying is I don't want to trivialize hard work. I think a lot of America and success is built on the backs of hard work. I just want to say I think the millennial generation as a whole, what he just said actually reflects a lot of what boomers will tell you and a lot of Xers will tell you. And I'm saying to some extent hard work is the ultimate equalizer of complacency, mediocrity. But I guess what I'm saying is if you worked harder at being smarter rather than working harder at working harder, you'll get a lot further. But no question to what he said, and I really admire the fact that he's passionate about using work as an equalizer.
No, I get it, and I only insult people I like, okay, Mr. Sensitive.
I'll cry later.
All right, Kayvon, real quick though, you only get like 20 seconds. Who are your heroes? Who are your entrepreneur heroes?
Like my favorite question, you're gonna give me 20 seconds, but
yeah. Because you took 3 minutes on the other one.
That's true. All right, definitely the traditional people that everybody looks up to: Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. I love them, but my favorite, and Larry Page, Google. I mean, we're using Google right now. But my favorite entrepreneur. Oh, hold up, I gotta get out my 2 music shout-outs: Jay-Z and Kanye West. My 2 favorite for music and creativity and business put together. But as far as business, and Amy, you probably could guess this. My favorite business, Milton Hershey, because he brought like affordable chocolate and milk chocolate to the world. Like before him, it was like a luxury thing, and he was able to.
He innovated. He was very much like Ford. And I just got to give a plug to Milton Hershey School. If you don't know what it is, Kayvon and I both, that's how we know each other. We're brother and sister, even though we're 30 years apart. We went to, and so did Kieran McGinnis, who's a regular on here. Milton Hershey School was founded by Milton Hershey of Hershey chocolate fame. He gave $90 million, I think, in 1909 to found the school, and 52% of Hershey Company to the school when he passed. And the school is for disadvantaged children. It's totally free, kindergarten through 12th grade. And if you stay on the straight and narrow, you get a scholarship for college for your undergraduate. So it changed thousands of lives. There are 9,000 graduates. So anyway, Joe.
That's what I'm inspired by. That last thing that you said. Like I want to help underprivileged people all over the world, and that's what he did. So that's why he's my favorite.
Good. I'm glad that was your answer. All right, Joe. Who are your heroes?
That's a long list.
Your entrepreneur heroes.
I got you. I'll throw a couple gals and a couple guys in the mix. I think it's Kimberly Bryant who started Black Girls Code. It's just a brilliant person. Did that at a time when, most African American girls just didn't even know that coding was a thing you could do. I think she's just a phenomenal person and just super smart and like clearly knows how to execute. And I think kind of to Daniel's point, like execution is sort of where it's at for me, right? Like I listen to people talk, and my first thought is like, yeah, what did you actually do? Like, I want to see how you actually did what you're talking about. So I sort of prize that aspect. So people like, like Kimberly Bryant, Alex Howard, who's a really smart, like, open data and civic tech guy. Anil Dash is in that category too. Just, he's a thinker. He's got insights. He's got experience. I think Lauren Bacon is another one. She opened her own web shop. She lives up in Vancouver. She opened her own web shop in 2000 and just crunched it out with another co-founder for 10 years. Really, really smart, really thoughtful. And then I think the one on the list that would be a little more traditional for me would be Mark Andreessen. I never said it out loud. I think it's Andreessen or Andreessen. He's got the level of experience and like long view that very few people in Silicon Valley do. So when he talks about something like disintermediation and like the bundling and unbundling of content, that's the foundation for Amazon, right? So I love to think about people like him who are like going back and looking at the way in which we all work together. Like, he's a very strategic person. So all those people would definitely be on the list.
All right, Miranda?
Yes.
Who are your entrepreneurial heroes?
Well, I believe that people spend a lot of time trying to be the next Steve Jobs, the next, Mark Zuckerberg, and, try to emulate them and try to become the next one of them. But I feel like people spend too much energy on that sometimes. I feel like, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, they've already achieved success. Nobody's going to, be like them. I feel like people can learn from everybody, anybody, good qualities, bad qualities, and take those qualities that they like and incorporate them and embody them in their own life to achieve success. So I think that if people focus more on being the best, it might sound cliche, but the best you that you can be, I feel like, that's better than, having heroes to emulate. I think that's my personal opinion.
Okay. No, that's interesting. Tiffany?
I know we're running short, so I'll have one. Thinking about everything that I personally am interested in and then just watching the world change, I'd say Russell Simmons is probably one of my, if not my top, because he was able to not only bring a new genre of music to mainstream, he's considered, I guess, the grandfather of hip-hop, depending on who you talk to, but beyond hip-hop and starting Def Jam Records, he brought poetry slams to mainstream media. He brought Def Poetry Jams. He's one of the first celebrity, not just endorsed, but celebrity-run fashion lines. Not that I'm necessarily worried about celebrity lines, but to be able to take it from music to poetry to fashion to finance with the Rush card, the prepaid debit cards. I mean, there's a lot of things that he touched just because he was able to be successful in music and take that in many different areas. So I'd say Russell Simmons is one of my top, or one of the biggest heroes.
You know what? Go ahead. You too.
I'd say. I was just saying, amen. I agree.
So one of the interesting.
Oops, Amy, you're muted.
Ezzy muted me. Come on, Ezzy.
Back.
So what was interesting about that is until Joe started describing his heroes, almost all of them were not millennials. And I mean, I guess that makes sense. You guys are just, except for the buffer guys, right? They're millennials, aren't they, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I don't think that's a bad thing. One of the things we talked about it last night. Joe and I were on Steam Feed Radio, and Daniel, and there are so many similarities among the generations that sometimes we get hung up on what makes millennials different. I mean, what fascinates me is how entrepreneurial your generation is in the face of all of the challenges, and also how optimistic you guys are. Because, I mean, I talk to millennials constantly, and it's just like a deep optimism, which I am impressed with.
All right. Can I sort of have a side, like a follow-up question? Can I toss that in really quick?
No, go ahead.
I'd be super curious to hear, like, pretty much what everyone thinks. Like, one of the things that I really prize and value, and I think I see this in other millennials, is like, I love people who walk up to you and you have that experience of like, yeah, you could do this. Go hack it. Do it yourself. Like, why not? I'm a very DIY kind of person by my nature. And so all of the people that I really look up to and like think about, like deeply about what they say, they all come from that same place of like, yeah, here, I'll tell you what I think, but you should just go do it yourself. And if you're not inspired to go do it yourself, then what am I doing for you? So I'm sort of curious if other people like get that same kind of vibe, in general, off of their heroes or people they look up to.
See, well, I wonder then, because one thing I do admire about you, Daniel Newman, is that you have great ideas and then you can execute them with getting other people to do the work, because that's how you scale, right? No, I don't mean the work. I mean you have ideas in businesses that don't require all of your man hours. And there's a guy named Frank Kenny who does Chamber of Commerce consulting. He's a pretty cool guy. He took social media to chambers of commerce and educates them. And one time I was trying to get him to come to my local chamber because I'm on the board, and he said, Amy, I don't make my money by the hour. I'm really trying not to make my money by the hour. And I thought, that's the difference, like, between him and me. He totally gets it. The way you really, and if you have money, you have freedom, right? The way you get there is not doing it all yourself. So Daniel, I talk about that a little bit, because Joe, it's like the counter to what you said, and I get it. I get that you learn by hacking and doing it yourself, but I think there's a whole other world that opens up when you can do what Daniel does, which is create an idea and a concept and then move on to the next great idea while someone else builds a lot of what you want them to do, right? Am I mischaracterizing you, Daniel?
No, you're just making me sound more impressive than I am. I think if you look back, and I'll use a social experiment, right? Amy, I think we actually met when Sean and I built 12 Most, right?
Yep.
And 12 Most was an idea. It wasn't really as much about money as it was about building community. But the whole idea was, we could create the content, write a lot, do SEO, do all those things, but the model of that isn't scalable, right? So, I became a professor of strategy, right? And the first thing they're going to tell you in the world of strategy is you can only grow as big, and if you're in consulting, to as many hours as you have in a day. So, when I built the businesses I have, it's always about how do I productize things that maybe are of great value. So you take something like building communities, right? Something you understand, social communities. You take social media engagement. You take content marketing. All these things are things that you can do by yourself, and a lot of businesses try to do it by themselves. But if you want to try to scale it, you're always going to be resource strong. So the more you can build the business to allow others to contribute, whether that's employees, contractors, partners, it allows you to grow and become an enterprise, right? Zuckerberg couldn't take Facebook forever. He could take it to a point, but then he needed a team. If you look at every great entrepreneur, most of them, it wasn't really their ability to do the work. It was their ability to get people around them to execute their vision and for them to continue to cheer them on even through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. See, to me, that's the greatest lesson. I think about you all the time when we're building ARC, because I am a DIY person. It is my temptation to do it myself. And Hesse constantly saying to me, you can't do it all, Amy. You can't do it. You can't do it. We create the methodology, and then we make sure it's done our way, right? And I think
I sort of agree with you, but I also think, because I totally, unfortunately, know way too much about scale, right? But I think, I don't know, maybe I was making a side sort of complimentary point, which is that I don't ever want to run a thing and hire people who aren't like exploratory, adventurous, scientific kind of chemistry type people. Because I think, ideally, at least for me, it's like I want people who don't want to be a cog in the wheel. They want to go out there. Because I think then you put somebody in place to do something in the structure you build, and you can trust them to figure it out if there's a problem with it. Like, that's kind of what I was...
But there's a difference, because I don't think that's what Daniel's doing. He's not putting cogs in a wheel. It's not like Milner.
I wasn't saying that. I was just saying I wasn't trying to make the point that every single thing should be sort of hacked together. I respect and appreciate that, but I don't think that's like the way to go all the time.
Well, I wasn't actually countering your point. I guess it just made me think of it that way, because now 12 Most, just Daniel didn't talk about it long enough. 12most.com actually grew into something really enormous, and it changed my life. I went there as a writer, and it was a list, basically a list, blogs, and I managed marketing and social media. I actually became an editor there. It was all volunteer. But Daniel, almost every important person in my social media marketing world, many of them came from that community. So what was fascinating to me about 12 Most, and it sort of it became somebody else's baby, and it grew into something else. At the height of it, I think it had, 30,000 visitors a day.
Yeah.
It gave a lot of bloggers a lot of exposure, including myself. So it was, but it was this incredible community. Now, probably a lot like Steam Feed is, Daniel there, where we were not just getting exposure and writing and thinking and having thought-provoking posts. We were getting to know each other, and it was a pretty cool community to build. And I mean, I know you guys didn't build it to make money, Daniel, but I think a lot of people's careers were empowered by the 12 Most experience.
Yeah, the social communities we created are pretty visible still today, and the passion of it was really giving exposure and creating an outlet for the next generation of talented writers to give them a platform, because it's hard. It's hard to get found, seen, and heard online. And I mean, I've built my business around that concept. And in the long run, like you said, it evolved and it did change into something else, but it absolutely became the personification of what community can look like when done right for a brand, for media. And you've seen how many of these crowdsourced blogs have really popped up since then, and you've seen they consistently work, like Steamfeed. It's a great example.
All right, so I'm going to start with you for the last bit. We have 9 minutes. What advice, what if you could give somebody 2 pieces of advice that's starting out, an entrepreneurial mind person, you're telling Kayvon something, right? We'll go that way. What are the 2 most important lessons or pieces of advice? It could be about anything, but to do with being an entrepreneur.
So was you me? You want me to take it back, and then then I can be done and I can vanish?
Yeah.
So I guess the 2 biggest pieces of advice I would say is, one is, if you're going to start something, a great idea that you don't like it just won't work. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I've seen to get into something for the money, and money is not enough to sustain for the long run. And I guess the second piece of advice I would give is, my father, and I wrote about this on my blog, my father was in the trucking business, didn't go to college, wasn't highly educated, very smart guy, but and he built a great business, ended up selling it to a family member of the Murdoch family, and he knew every piece of his business. So when I say hard work, let me reiterate that a smart entrepreneur never outsources the intelligence or capabilities of his company. He always understands them. So no matter what it is you do, you have to at least understand fundamentally your business. And that's the only way you can lead people and manage people, is if you actually know what they do, know what they're capable of. And on the other side of that, with human capital, I'll say, is making sure that you really invest in your people. And that's my 2.
Great. Thanks for your time. All right, Daniel Hebert, give us your advice.
The first one is kind of like what Dan was saying. Around if you start something up, you need to really love it. You need to really like it, because if not, you're just not going to put your heart and soul into it, and it's never going to go anywhere. So it can be a really, really great idea, but if you're not in love with it, just maybe keep thinking and go on to the next idea. The other thing I would say is develop a strong network of experts. You don't know everything about your business, and you will never know everything about your business. So get people at every single stage of your business that can help you out, that can give you advice, that you can bounce off ideas from. For example, Steamfeed, we're not super technical guys, so we have technical friends that help us out. When we started off, we weren't super familiar with SEO, so we had SEO friends helping us out. We have friends that run media companies, that are producers, that run news agencies, or all that stuff, that we keep bouncing off ideas. We keep learning from these experts to help better the parts of our business that we don't fully understand.
Okay. All right, Ezzy, you go. What's your 2 pieces? Gotta do them real quick. 2 pieces of advice that you give to an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I'd like to echo a lot of the things that he just mentioned. The primary thing I see with the entrepreneurial community is people get to a point where they've developed a certain skill set, and then they take off in their venture, and they only focus on their venture and stop focusing on their skills development personally. And so what ends up happening is they stop growing as a person, and any problems that come up in the business they deal with the same skill set that they had when they started the company. And I think that it's something that you see in the corporate world, as well as the entrepreneurial world, is that when you get to a certain level, you have so many problems you deal with that you just focus on those problems. And so I would say, one, building out the network so that you can touch base with those people when you need them, which means you have to have those connections, which means that you have to have built that relationship ahead of time. If you think you're going to need social media ahead of time, get to know the people in the social media club so that it's not an expensive lesson when you do learn it. Or American Advertising Federation, take them out to a happy hour or go to one of their happy hours, buy a couple drinks, and that, $15 is, just saved you a few thousand. And so things like that with cultivating relationships, I don't see a lot of, and it really should be commonplace. And the second thing is that skills development continually. So the last little bit I'll say is that, and I was going to bring this up a little bit earlier, but had some technical problems. The last piece I'll say is that there's certain attributes that determine successful people, whether they're entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. The skill set is exactly the same in that you're risking a certain degree of capital, whether it's social capital entrepreneurially or whether it's financial capital and maybe reputation externally, and both of which can severely impact your ability to for security financially or otherwise. But with that being said, like you've developed the skills and the relationships enough to where if you run into problems with whatever it is you're working in, you can touch base with those people accordingly to bring them in. And that was one of the things that I saw in my former life as the chair of a think tank at the first think tank at a multinational investment bank, is that you have 40,000 people who work for this investment bank globally, and no one was really willing to take the risk to inform the relationships to build this thing out, to build a project out correctly. So they would see one person attempt it on their own with whatever skills that they had developed to that point, and it may or may not be successful, and they'd use that as a model instead of building the connections first and then really trying to drive it. And so so that's what I'd say.
All right, Joe, real quick, I got you're probably my last one, Joe. What's advice for an entrepreneur?
Always price execution. GSD, get shit done above all else, and care about people. Above all else, just be a good human. You can't do good work in the world unless you're not concerned with being a good human.
That's awesome. All right, Miranda, you have 2 pieces of advice for someone starting out as an entrepreneur?
Yes, I would say persistence is a big one because there are a lot of ups and downs in entrepreneurship, a lot of risk involved, and it's also important to find a way to overcome those obstacles. This has already been touched on before, but networking is a big one. Having a team that you can trust, and also having people around you that can help support you whenever things get rough. And it also kind of goes into what somebody else said about having others that can help you with your business because you don't know everything about it. It's kind of having those people to see you through those obstacles.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that the mentorship is important. Tiffany, do you have any advice, real quick? I've got you get 1 minute, and then I've got to say goodbye.
Mine might be just maybe. Well, I don't even know how to say it, but following Miranda's, to make sure that you have the emotional support as well as the financial support, and staying up to date on your competition. I work with a lot of individuals that have started businesses and think they have more time to get to market than they do, or to become competitive, and they're not as agile as they need to be to upgrade or be able to explain what sets them apart. And so just make sure that you love what you are doing, as Daniel said, and that you know why what you're doing is better than your competition.
That's excellent. Excellent advice. Okay, so we're going to have to wrap things up. I know we try to pack a lot of people and a lot of ideas into an hour. So next week, we tackle privacy and millennials' view on privacy, because obviously the world has changed in the since social media really. So hopefully you'll see us here next week at 8 o'clock to tackle millennials' ideas about privacy and how they see it. Okay, so thanks everybody. Now, think tankers, you can hang on. I'm going to stop the live broadcast now, and if you want to stick around, we can have a chat. Bye everyone. Thanks for watching.